I still remember the weight of the air that afternoon, the sunlight spilling across Jake's blanket, the soft hum of the baby monitor, the quiet that didn't feel safe anymore. My hands shook as I held his teddy bear, heavier than it should have been, like it was keeping a secret. If you've ever trusted your family and felt that trust slip through your fingers, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. That day, I thought I was just an overprotective grandmother. But when I found what was hidden inside that bear, I learned how wrong I was. Let me show you how it all began. It was a quiet afternoon, around 2:30 p.m., when I first felt something was wrong. The house was still, only the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint ticking of the wall. Clock in the hallway. Jake had gone down for his nap, and like I often did, I stayed behind in his room for a minute or two. I remember smoothing his blanket, that little blue one with the stars, when my hand brushed over his teddy bear, and I heard it, a faint clicking sound from inside. At first, I thought it was one of those sound chips, the kind that play lullabies when you squeeze them. But this one wasn't where it should be. The noise wasn't soft or musical. It was mechanical, hollow, wrong. I sat down on the edge of the bed, that old wooden frame creaking beneath me, and turned the bear over in my hands. It was heavier than I remembered. I felt along the seams, my fingers tracing the stitches like they could give me answers. And then I saw it. One thread slightly thicker than the rest, darker, almost hidden near the back of the neck. A chill ran through me. I got the sewing scissors from Jake's dresser and cut it open, slow and careful. What fell out wasn't stuffing. It was a tiny black device, smooth, cold, with a small blinking light. My first thought was that it had to be some sort of toy accessory. But when I turned it over and saw a pinhole lens, my stomach dropped. A camera inside my grandson's teddy bear? I just sat there for a moment, frozen. The air in the room felt heavier, like it was pressing against my chest. My hands were shaking, and all I could think was, who would do this? And that's when everything started to change. That moment, that discovery. It tore open something I'd been ignoring for a long time. The uneasy feeling I'd had for months suddenly made sense. I didn't know it then, but finding that little device would lead me down a path that would test everything I believed about family, trust, and instinct. People always said we looked like the perfect family. Eric had a good job in Columbus. Laura kept a spotless home. And Jake, well, he was the kind of little boy who could make anyone smile. But perfect has a way of hiding things. I remember weekends when I'd drive over from Dayton just to spend time with Jake. He'd run to me with his arms open, that sweet laugh echoing through the hall. I lived for those moments. But as time went on, I began to notice things that didn't sit right. Laura had always been polite, but there was a chill beneath it. She'd smile, but her eyes would drift, like she was somewhere else. She didn't like when I stayed too long. I told myself she just needed space, that maybe I reminded her too much of her mother-in-law. But it wasn't just that. Eric started to change too. He was quieter, sharper around the edges. If I asked simple things, how work was going, how they were doing, he'd brush it off. Sometimes I'd hear tension in his voice, a shortness that wasn't there before. I thought maybe they were just tired new parents. I tried not to pry. But the one who told me something was wrong was Jake. Children don't always speak with words. They show it in how they move, how they look at you. He'd flinch at sudden noises, cling tighter when I hugged him goodbye. Once, when I asked if he liked his new babysitter, he froze, like he wasn't supposed to talk about it. There was something in that house I couldn't name, an unease that settled deep in my chest. Nights after visiting, I'd sit awake, replaying every small detail. Laura's forced smile, the way Eric avoided eye contact, Jake's silence when he should have been laughing. But then, I'd scold myself. I was a mother, not a detective. Maybe I was reading too much into things. Families have rough patches. People get tired. Maybe I was just being sensitive. Still, that quiet voice inside me never stopped whispering. It said, "Look closer." I told myself I was overreacting, that everything would go back to normal. But deep down, I knew I wasn't wrong. That feeling, that ache in my gut, wasn't going away. And a few weeks later, when I found that teddy bear in Jake's room, I realized exactly why. It was an ordinary Thursday afternoon when I went into Jake's room to tidy up. The sun was spilling through the curtains, catching little flecks of dust in the air. His toys were scattered across the carpet. Plastic cars, blocks, crayons. Everything looked like any other day in a little boy's world. Ordinary, safe. I bent down to make his bed, straightened his pillow, and picked up his teddy bear from the floor. It was the same bear he'd had since he was a baby, a little worn around the ears. The fur matted from years of love. I brushed some lint off its paw and went to set it back on the shelf. But something felt wrong. It was heavier than it should have been. At first, I thought maybe Jake had tucked something inside. Kids do that. Maybe a marble, a crayon, some little secret treasure. But when I turned it over, I heard it. A faint mechanical click from somewhere inside. Not loud, not constant, just there. I froze. I pressed my fingers against the stitching, running them slowly along the seams. The fur was soft, but there was something solid underneath. Something cold. My heart started pounding. I could feel sweat gather at the base of my neck. I sat down on the floor right there beside the bed, scissors trembling in my hand. I told myself it was nothing. Probably just a broken sound box. That's all. But when I cut through the seam and pulled the stuffing aside, I saw it. A small, black piece of plastic, no bigger than a thumb drive. A light blinked on its side, tiny, red, and pulsing. A camera. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The world around me seemed to shrink. My hands went numb, and I remember whispering to myself, trying to make sense of something that made none. Who would put a camera in a child's toy? Why here? Why Jake's room? I looked around, half expecting someone to be watching me right then. Every creak in the house felt louder. I thought about calling Eric, but doubt stopped me cold. What if he already knew? What if Laura did? My stomach twisted. The thought was unbearable, but so was ignoring it. I wrapped the bear in a pillowcase and took it home with me that evening. I told them I was taking it to clean the stitching. I smiled as I said it, pretending nothing was wrong. That night, I set the bear on my kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. Finally, I pulled the memory card out of the device and slid it into my laptop. The screen flickered. At first, it was just static. Then, grainy footage appeared. Jake's room, his bed, the window, and then him, Jake, sitting on the floor, playing, laughing, completely unaware that someone was recording him. My blood went cold. I watched a few seconds, maybe a minute, before I slammed the laptop shut. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely breathe. Whoever had done this, they'd been watching. For how long? From where I sat in the dark kitchen until morning. That red light burned into my mind. The next day, I decided I couldn't stay silent any longer. I was going to confront them. Laura, Eric, whoever was responsible. I didn't know what I would say, but I knew one thing for certain. Someone in that house wasn't who they seemed. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that blinking red light, that tiny camera staring back at me like an open eye. I kept hearing Jake's laughter echoing from the footage. Innocent, unaware. I sat in the dark until the clock on the stove read 7:15 a.m. My coffee gone cold, my hands shaking. By morning, I'd convinced myself I had to confront Laura. She was the one home with Jake most days. She had access to his toys, his room, My heart was pounding as I drove over. The teddy bear locked in the trunk. When she opened the door, she looked like she always did. Composed, neat, polite. But that calmness, it grated on me now. I told her I needed to talk about something serious, something involving Jake. She frowned, confused, maybe offended. I could feel the words spilling out of me too fast, my voice cracking under the weight of fear. I showed her the bear, told her what I'd found, what it meant. Her face went pale, then hard. She denied everything, her tone sharp, cold. She acted insulted, like I'd accused her of something unforgivable. That's when Eric walked in, still half asleep, rubbing his eyes. He looked between us, then at me. I expected him to defend me, to listen, to see the panic in my eyes. But he didn't. He just sighed, put his hand on Laura's shoulder, and told me I was taking things too far. Said I'd scared everyone enough with my imagination. I felt my chest tighten, like the air had been sucked out of the room. My own son looked at me like I was crazy, like I'd lost touch with reality. I left before I broke down completely, drove home in silence. Every mile felt heavier than the last. I kept asking myself, had I really imagined it? Had I let my fear get the best of me that night? I opened the laptop again. I needed to be sure. I replayed the footage frame by frame, staring at every shadow, every flicker. And then I saw it. In the reflection of the window, just for a second, there was an arm. Not Laura's, not Eric's. It was thicker, older. The skin pale, the sleeve long and floral. I froze. I knew that pattern. It wasn't Laura at all. It was someone else entirely. Someone who had been in that house more times than I could count. Someone who'd always brought over casseroles, who'd smiled and asked about Jake's school. Betty. The name escaped my lips in a whisper. Like it had been sitting on my tongue the whole time. I sat there for a long moment, my mind spinning. Everything I thought I knew about what was happening. The guilt, the blame. It had all been pointed in the wrong direction. And now, I realized the real danger was much closer than I'd ever imagined. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would start watching Betty, quietly, carefully. I needed to know the truth. It started with a phone call just after 3 o'clock. Eric's voice was frantic. Jake hadn't come home from school. At first, I thought maybe the bus had run late, or he'd stopped by a friend's house. But when I heard the tremor in Eric's voice, something inside me broke. The next hours blurred together. Sirens, flashing lights, neighbors whispering on their lawns. The police went door to door. Laura was in pieces, pacing the driveway, her face ghost white. I stood there, frozen, feeling the weight of every moment I hadn't acted sooner. Every time I doubted myself, I'd been right about something being wrong. But now, it was too late. I told the officers about the teddy bear, the hidden camera, the footage I'd seen. They listened politely, but when they looked at the files on my laptop, they were gone, completely wiped, not a trace left. They asked if I was sure I hadn't imagined it. The pity in their eyes made me feel small, crazy. That's when I saw Betty standing at the edge of her yard. She was holding a casserole dish, pretending to comfort Laura. Her face looked calm, too calm. When our eyes met, she gave me a smile that felt wrong, empty. I remembered her saying once that her tech friend helped her fix her security system. The phrase suddenly hit differently. My stomach twisted. That night, I couldn't stay still. I watched Betty's house from my kitchen window, the yellow porch light glowing faintly through the dark. Around midnight, I saw her walk across the yard toward the shed behind her house. There was a flicker of light inside, a faint glow that pulsed, like from electronics. I knew I shouldn't go, but I did. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the flashlight. The grass was wet under my shoes as I crept along the fence line. I could hear a faint hum coming from inside the shed. I looked through a crack in the wood and saw screens. Dozens of them. Small monitors stacked on metal shelves, each showing rooms. Some I didn't recognize. I caught my breath. Then a hand clamped over my mouth. A man's voice hissed in my ear, low and steady, telling me to stop asking questions if I wanted to see my family safe. I struggled, kicked, twisted free just long enough to stumble into the darkness and run. My lungs burned as I made it back to my porch, heart hammering like it would burst. It wasn't just Betty. It couldn't be. Those monitors, that man, they were part of something bigger, something organized. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. The local police wouldn't believe me. The files were gone, evidence erased, but I'd seen too much to walk away. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone, my hands trembling as I dialed a number I never thought I'd call. The FBI. Because whatever had taken Jake, it wasn't just a neighbor's secret. It was a network, and I was going to bring it down. I made the call just after sunrise. My voice shook so badly I could barely get the words out, but I told the operator everything. About the camera, the shed, the man, the missing child. Within hours, 2 agents arrived at my home. One of them, Agent Collins, sat across from me at the kitchen table. Calm, steady, patient. He listened without interrupting as I told him everything from the beginning, my hands gripping the cold mug of coffee like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. When I slid the teddy bear across the table, he picked it up gently, turned it over, and examined the stitching. I watched his face change, subtle at first, then grave. He said the serial number matched equipment they'd been tracking for months. I didn't understand what that meant. Not right away. Then he told me. The same kind of cameras had been found in multiple homes across the state, all linked to an organized trafficking network that recorded and sold videos of children. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred. The walls seemed to tilt. I had to grip the edge of the table just to steady myself. I remember hearing my own heartbeat in my ears, like a drum that wouldn't stop. Jake wasn't just being watched. He had been targeted. They showed me photos, maps, names, addresses, and there she was, Betty, her smiling face among a list of suspects. But she wasn't alone. Another face stared back at me, a woman who'd called herself a child therapist, the one Laura had taken Jake to for behavioral issues. I'd met her once. She'd seemed kind, professional. My stomach twisted as the pieces fell into place. I asked how many children were involved. Agent Collins hesitated before answering. Dozens. Maybe more. Families who had no idea what was happening under their roofs. I don't know how long I cried. I just remember sitting there, my body shaking, every breath heavy. The guilt was unbearable. I kept thinking, if I hadn't found that camera, if I'd ignored my instinct like everyone told me to, how many more would have suffered within 48 hours? The FBI raided multiple properties, including Betty's shed. They found the servers, the footage, and the people behind it all. Late that night, they called me. They'd found Jake. He was alive, scared, disoriented, but safe. When I saw him again, his small hands reached out for me like no time had passed at all. I held him so tight I could barely breathe. I didn't care about anything else in that moment. The sirens, the noise, the cameras outside my house. My grandson was home. But as I looked at him, I realized something deeper. This wasn't just about Jake. My instinct, that quiet voice I'd doubted for so long, had helped stop something much bigger than I could ever have imagined. When the agents thanked me, I didn't feel like a hero. I just felt tired, grateful, changed. That night, as I watched Jake sleep on the couch beside me, I knew the road ahead would be long. Healing never comes easy. But for the first time in a long while, the world felt a little safer. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of our recovery. When they brought Jake out of that house, I barely recognized him at first. He looked smaller somehow, his eyes wide and tired, clutching the blanket the agents had wrapped around him. The moment he saw me, he ran straight into my arms. I can still feel the weight of him, the way his little body trembled, the way he clung to my neck and wouldn't let go. For the first time in days, I let myself cry. The agents moved quickly after that. Betty was taken away in handcuffs, her face blank, her voice calm like she didn't understand what she'd done. The others followed, the fake therapist, the man from the shed. Watching them go didn't feel like victory. It felt hollow, like standing in the ruins of something that should never have existed. Those first few days after the rescue were a blur of questions, news reports, and sleepless nights. Jake slept beside me on the couch every night. I'd wake to the sound of his soft breathing, and for a moment I'd forget everything that had happened. Then it would all come back, heavy as ever. But even through the exhaustion, there was gratitude, pure and overwhelming. I watched Eric and Laura fall apart, then slowly come back together. We stopped blaming each other. We started talking again, softly at first, like people afraid to break something fragile. Jake began to laugh again, not all the time, but enough to remind me that children are stronger than we think. Sometimes I catch myself staring out the window at night, remembering how close we came to losing him. The fear still lingers, but so does something else. Peace, a quiet knowing that instinct, love, and persistence can still cut through darkness. Survival isn't the end. It's where the healing begins. Sometimes I sit by the window at dusk and think about how close we came to losing everything. The fear has faded, but the lessons remain. I learned that love is louder than doubt, and that a quiet instinct, no matter how small, can change everything if you trust it. Jake is safe now. Our family laughs again, though the shadows haven't fully left. I've made peace with that. Scars mean we survived. If you're watching this and something in your heart feels wrong, listen to it. Protect what matters. And tell me, have you ever faced something you couldn't ignore? I read every comment,